Good evening, or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are having a good afternoon. Welcome to the Kiana Kennedy Show. Uh, sorry. Oh, okay. Welcome to the Kiana Kennedy Show. I'm here. I'm here. And I hope you had an excellent New Year's Day. So, what I did for New Year's is I actually went out to a nightclub, and I really didn't hang out there too long. I went there and just kind of listened to some music and I came back home. But I hope that you were able to bring in the New Year's, with a bang, and that you actually made some wonderful New Year's resolutions. And I made a couple myself, and hopefully those resolutions will actually come to fruition and to show at the end of the year. Uh, I will let you know. At the end of the year, if that is so. But before we get into today's topic, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. When you subscribe to this channel, you can actually receive more of these videos. And also, if you like this video, what it does is it pushes this video up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that these videos are important. But we must be reminded, ladies and gentlemen, that just because these videos are not pushed up in the algorithm, it does not mean that this content is not important, although it is important. Okay, so before I get into today's topic, I said that, and I want to go ahead and issue a disclaimer. So if there are any complications with this live stream, so complications with the mic, if there's complications with if you see me actually coming back on live and saying that I have been logged out, please understand that I'm not logging myself out, and nor is there anything wrong with this particular microphone. This is a brand new microphone. And so if you've been following my story, you understand that I'm going through transnational repression. And what is happening is that individuals with cyber capacities and capabilities, in other words, hackers, are actually getting into these videos, editing them, logging me out of the live stream, and also, altering the thumbnail. Not only altering the thumbnail, but in some cases they have actually, got into the microphone and, created some disturbances. And so if that happens during this live stream, I'm not going to edit it out, because I'm going to actually keep that into these videos as evidence. As you can see, each thumbnail has an exhibit number. So if there is any alterations during this live stream when I'm talking about human rights issues, then this is going to be used as evidence. As you know, this is a public watchdog it's a public watchdog vlog, and so it is very important for me to actually report on these human rights violations that are happening every day in the news. And so if other people can report on them without experiencing this kind of intimidation online, I can report on them as well. Okay, so let's get into today's story. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a disturbing story coming out of New York City. There was a man named Robert Brooks who was arbitrarily executed by correctional officers in New York City in one of the prisons. And ladies and gentlemen, that prison is called Marcy Correctional Facility. And so a little bit about Robert Brooks. He was a man that was serving, of course, a sentence for a crime. And that crime was, I believe, that he stabbed his ex-girlfriend, but she she didn't die. She's still alive. And this video in no way, ladies and gentlemen, condones violence of any sort. That's not what I'm here to do. I actually condemn all acts of violence. But we must be reminded, ladies and gentlemen, that just because someone has a criminal history does not mean that they deserve to be bullied, deserve to be arbitrarily executed, that their history warrants a lifetime of double jeopardy and triple jeopardy. This unending, this perpetual continuum of violence. No. And so I think that this is something that we need to really, I think, reflect on as a people. Now, I think that Robert Brooks was on his way, at least from what I am reading in the headlines. Now, things could change every day, but what I'm reading now, it states that Robert Brooks was, trying to become a musician. So maybe perhaps he was doing that while he was incarcerated. And not only was he doing that, but he had received his GED while he was incarcerated. So, this shows that he is not just sitting in there getting into trouble, that he is trying to, do something positive to try and rehabilitate himself. And, accomplishing a GED is, I think, admirable for somebody who is incarcerated. I mean, he could have actually been doing something else with his time in there, right? But he decided to actually pursue his education again. And so I think that is worthy of acknowledgement. But more disturbingly, what we see, ladies and gentlemen, is that there are several videos released by Letitia James, her office, which is depicting an arbitrary execution of Robert Brooks. Now, there is no updated information that is telling us how Robert Brooks actually, the first assault that happened to Robert Brooks. So, as you know, Robert Brooks was at a different facility and he was transferred to this Marcy Correctional Facility. That's where he was transferred to. And before he came into this facility, allegedly he had already had like a broken nose, or allegedly there was already, someone hit him. And so we don't know exactly who those persons are. Maybe that was an inmate, or maybe those were correction officers that were bringing him into Marcy facility. But what we see, ladies and gentlemen, is when they're bringing him into the facility, they're actually carrying him in. So it's kind of like, I really don't know what this position is called, and I'll link that video in the description. But his stomach is facing the ground, and there's an officer that is carrying him by the arms, so his hands are behind his back, and then there's another officer that's carrying him by the legs. And so they're carrying him, dragging him into this medical examination room. And ladies and gentlemen, so while he's in the examination room, what the officers are doing, who are known as the beat up squad, they are punching him in the stomach, punching him in the genitals, punching him in the face, grabbing his neck, grabbing him up by the neck, choking him, and just really attacking this person. And I want you to reflect on that for a moment. how Robert was handcuffed, was unable to actually stop them from attacking him. He wasn't able to cover his face. He wasn't able to protect his stomach or his genital area. He wasn't able to, stop the blows. And it continued. And so there are several videos of this arbitrary execution. And the reason why I'm using that word is because, or this phrase is because, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Brooks died from the assault. Unfortunately, he did. And disturbingly, a lot of the correctional officers that were present were just standing around. And there were also medical professionals or, nurses, medical persons in this facility that were just standing around laughing. And so it appears, so I think that this assault went on for approximately 20 minutes. And what was being shown is that a few of the officers within this room were taking turns attacking Robert Brooks, beating him up. And I want you to think about that for a moment. Stephen A. Smith raised an important question. Stephen A. Smith said, why are none of these correctional officers arrested? In his podcast, just a moment, I'm going to see what that podcast is called. Or not the podcast, but the title of that video. He did a live, let's see. So he did a live and he said, where are the arrests? And so, ladies and gentlemen, he was very passionate about this particular topic. And he raises an important question. Like Stephen A. Smith says, where are the arrests? And I'm raising that question as well. Like, why haven't any of these officers been arrested? We see on camera that they are actually attacking this person, attacking Robert Brooks. We see on camera that they are assaulting him while he is in handcuffs. So why aren't any of them arrested? And according to, or as Robert Brooks, as Stephen A. Smith describes, this is indicative of a lynching. And ladies and gentlemen, a lynching can take place within the public realm or it can take place in the private realm. It does not necessarily have to be public. And so is this a form of vigilante violence? Well, I wouldn't not necessarily call this vigilantism, because vigilantism is, the definition of it, vigilantism is a person who is taking the law into their own hands. If, someone is suspected of committing a crime, and so therefore they feel that the law is not, reaching these persons, that the law is not going far enough. And so what they do is that they take the law into their own hands. And so I don't think that that definition fits in this case. For vigilantism, what I think is that this was a lynching in private space. And so I think it happened, or, well, I won't say I think, I know that it happened because they were able to get away with this kind of assaults before. This isn't the first time that these officers actually attacked prisoners. Once before, two of the correctional officers that are seen in the video put a prisoner in a wheelchair. So basically, they beat him up, and from that assault, the prisoner was left wheelchair bound. And so they had actually assaulted a number of prisoners. And ladies and gentlemen, these cops were known as the beat up squad. And so most prisoners knew that if you encountered this group of correctional officers, that you were likely to be attacked, beat up, and in some cases, as we've seen with Robert Brooks, your life being taken away from you arbitrarily. And so I am deeply concerned about this particular case, ladies and gentlemen, because just because you are incarcerated in a prison system does not give officers the right to attack you, does not give officers the right to take your life. The right to life is one of the most precious rights that we have. And so what I feel is that when we're talking about law enforcement in the United States, we are really not taking into consideration that law enforcement are committing a number of crimes that, in my opinion, are starting to reach an international level. So now it appears to me that domestic law is not actually strong enough or robust enough to handle these kinds of crimes, and we may need to rely on international law to address these issues that are happening within the state. It's deeply concerning. So for one, I want to read you the definition of what an arbitrary execution is. So we're on the same sheet of music. We understand that we need to start to adopt a different language when we are talking about these kinds of crimes. So given the connotation of the right to life, and so I'm reading from the International Commission of Jurists Handbook, and so given the connotation of the right to life, the international community addresses states' obligations in order not to generate and achieve better conditions for the real and effective enjoyment of the particular right, but also to establish limitations and prohibitions for their actions. The arbitrary deprivation of life occurs when an officer or agent of the state, in exercise of his functions, or a third party, either by the instigation or consent of the state, deprives a person or a group of people of life by an act or omission, albeit intentionally, by negligence, or by the disproportionate or excessive use of force. Again, let me read that again. The arbitrary deprivation of life occurs when an officer or an agent of the state, in exercise of his duties, or third party, either by the instigation or consent of the state, deprives a person or a group of people of life by an act or omission, albeit intentionally, by negligence, or by the disproportionate or excessive use of force. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think that encapsulates what we have seen in these videos that are on the website of Letitia James, and of course on Wikipedia, and in several that have been uploaded to several YouTube accounts in the media, what we've seen is an arbitrary deprivation of life. And so it was an arbitrary deprivation of life by omission because the medical personnel did not step in and help Robert Brooks. They only stepped in to try and render aid after the officers were finished brutalizing and beating him up, right? So they didn't say, okay, you're about to actually kill this man. They didn't step in at all. They allowed the abuse to continue over time. And so they only stepped in because, they felt, not that they felt like it was an obligation to them, but just because they were in the room. That's what it appeared as if like they were very cavalier about it, not necessarily wanting to really see if he was going to be all right or to make sure that he was going to live. They just kind of like, okay, well, we have to do this. We have to pretend like that we care about this. That was the attitude of the officers. And so intentionally or negligently, in this case, ladies and gentlemen, none of the acts were negligent, right? We could say possibly the acts of the medical personnel was negligent, but because they didn't step in sooner. But the acts of the correctional officers that were involved in this brutality of Robert Brooks, this was intentional. This was an intentional act. I keep getting lipstick on my teeth. Okay. I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I had lipstick on my teeth. This was an intentional act, very intentional. And so I'm deeply concerned about that, deeply concerned. Like I'm very concerned that this took place. Now, the state has a negative duty to refrain from illegitimately taking life of individuals. So did the state honor its negative obligation? No. They also have a positive obligation to prevent harm when it comes from third parties. Now, the state is conducting an investigation into this Robert Brooks case, but ladies and gentlemen, they need to do more than conduct an investigation. This is time for action. The state must arrest these officers. And when we're speaking about the right to life, it's important to understand that the right to life is non-derogable, right? So you can't deviate from the right to life. You can't disparage the right to life. You can't derogate from the right to life. It does not matter if the person is in prison. It doesn't matter if the person is protesting on the street. It doesn't matter if the person has submitted an asylum claim and they're an activist and they are speaking out against human rights violations and the state does not like their content. The right to life is non-derogable. Again, let me repeat that. The right to life is non-derogable. Thus, the right to life is an inalienable attribute of human beings and forms the supreme value in the hierarchy of human rights. It is the supreme right of rights. It is the right that actually allows us to enjoy and be able to of course, enjoy other rights, but not only that, right? So if our right to life is being derogated and disparaged, then all other rights are going to be derogated and disparaged as well. So it's the link to all of the other rights. It's the most important link. And so if this link breaks, then all of the other links are going to break as well. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to really just kind of contemplate on this story. Oh my God, it is a disturbing time that we see a story like this, and that we continue to see stories like this without any action of the state. And now is the time for the state to really act. It's time for the state to show us that it is going to protect life, that when there is an arbitrary taking of a life, that the state is going to step in and not just go through the motions of, doing an investigation, really be serious and thoroughly conduct an investigation. Now is the time they need to actually also, what also needs to happen, ladies and gentlemen, not only do arrests need to happen, but also there needs to be a change in, excuse me, so not only do arrests need to happen, but there needs to be lustration from the top to the bottom, because this has happened too long. So they need to go in there and wipe out all of, from the warden or from this person sitting at the top, the major or the captain who is ever sitting at the top. They need to fire all of those people and bring in new personnel, bring in new leadership. There needs to be lustration because this has happened too long. And ladies and gentlemen, you can't just fire these officers without actually getting at, the root cause, right? And so the root cause is what's happening at the top. The top is allowing these kinds of crimes to happen. And so you don't actually trim a tree that has, dead leaves on it. If the tree is dead, you have to actually uproot the entire tree and plant a new one. And so what we have seen in this case is that there is corruption at the very top that is allowing correctional officers to not only arbitrarily execute, not only brutalize prisoners, but also arbitrarily execute them as well, as we've seen in the Roberts Brooks case. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time that, one, there be lustration. Two, there be a call for lustration. There is a call to action for lustration. Three, that we start to understand this is an arbitrary execution. Yes, it's a lynching in private space, but legally, in terms of international law, this is an arbitrary execution, and that domestic law does not seem to be formulated to stopping these kinds of acts. And so should we take these claims abroad is the question. And what is the United States going to do about these kinds of cases that are piling up? Remember, I'll say it again to reiterate, this was not the first time that these officers engaged in this kind of criminality. Just a moment. So the officers, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. I'm going to read to you what is on Wikipedia. And I understand Wikipedia is really not the most legitimate source of information, but it is a quick source to kind of give you the facts of what has happened, without actually going into like a peer-reviewed study or a peer-reviewed journal article about a particular issue. And so they said prior to the killing of Robert Brooks, Marcy Correctional Facility was the subject of numerous reports of prisoner abuse. C.O. Anthony Farina and Sergeant Glenn Trombley, both implicated in the unalivement of Robert Brooks, were involved in the 2020 assault of and disfigurement of the inmate William Alvarez. In 2015, Trombley was involved in the assault of the inmate Equan, I guess that's how you pronounce his name, Equan White, after which White needed a wheelchair while recovering. Then CEO Nicholas Anzalone, also implicated in the unalivement of Brooks, was one of the 4 Marcy officers named in a federal lawsuit for the 2020 beating of Adam Bauer, a non-violent person. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you can kind of see that these officers had a history of state crime, had a history of these attacks on inmates. They were doing it because they knew that they could get away with it. They were doing it because they knew that no one would advocate on the behalf of these inmates because they were, in fact, in jail for a crime. And so they were stigmatized. And so they understand that there is an hierarchy of trust and credibility within prisons. So if an inmate makes a complaint about a particular issue or circumstance or crime, saying that they've been assaulted, that their word is really not going to hold a lot of weight. It's not going to be creditable when it comes to these officers, because several officers are getting together and coming up with a story, and that story is holding more weight. So of course, within the settings of a prison, prisoners are not really seen as epistemic subjects, as people who are able to reason and know and able to understand their circumstances when it comes to being able to articulate that they've been abused and their story being heard seriously by human rights organizations or being heard seriously by personnel within the context of the prison setting. So it's something to really reflect on and to ask ourselves, like, is this what America is about? And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kiana Canada. And what do you think? Do you think that this was an arbitrary execution? Do you think that the law enforcement the correctional officers in this case should be arrested? Do you think that the state not arresting them now serves as an indication that the state is corrupt? Do you think that the state should do more to stop these kinds of violent acts against not only prisoners, but homeless people and marginalized groups who are unable to protect themselves? What do you think? There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.